The Destruction of the Sinful Cities by Ginzberg. The angels left Abraham at noontime, and they reached Sodom at the approach of evening. As a rule, angels proclaim their errand with the swiftness of lightning, but these were angels of mercy, and they hesitated to execute their work of destruction, ever hoping that the evil would be turned aside from Sodom. With nightfall, the fate of Sodom was sealed irrevocably, and the angels arrived there 170. Bred in the house of Abraham, Lot had learnt from him the beautiful custom of extending hospitality, and when he saw the angels before him in human form, thinking they were wayfarers, he bade them turn aside and tarry all night in his house. But as the entertainment of strangers was forbidden in Sodom on penalty of death, he dared invite them only under cover of the darkness of night 171, and even then he had to use every manner of precaution, bidding the angels to follow him by devious ways. The angels, who had accepted Abraham's hospitality without delay, first refused to comply with Lot's request, for it is a rule of good breeding to show reluctance when an ordinary man invites one, but to accept the invitation of a great man at once. Lot, however, was insistent, and carried them into his house by main force 172. At home, he had to overcome the opposition of his wife, for she said, "If the inhabitants of Sodom hear of this, they will slay thee." Lot divided his dwelling in two parts, one for himself and his guests, the other for his wife, so that if aught happened his wife would be spared. Nevertheless it was she who betrayed him. She went to a neighbor and borrowed some salt, and to the question whether she could not have supplied herself with salt during daylight hours, she replied, "We had enough salt until some guests came to us, for them we needed more." In this way the presence of strangers was bruited abroad in the city 174. In the beginning the angels were inclined to hearken to the petition of Lot in behalf of the sinners, but when all the people of the city, big and little, crowded around the house of Lot with the purpose of committing a monstrous crime, the angels warded off his prayers, saying, "Hitherto thou couldst intercede for them, but now no longer." It was not the first time that the inhabitants of Sodom wanted to perpetrate a crime of this sort. They had made a law some time before that all strangers were to be treated in this horrible way. Lot, who was appointed chief judge on the very day of the angels' coming, tried to induce the people to desist from their purpose, saying to them, "My brethren, the generation of the deluge was extirpated in consequence of such sins as you desire to commit, and you would revert to them." But they replied, "Back, and though Abraham himself came hither we should have no consideration for him. Is it possible that thou wouldst set aside a law which thy predecessors administered?" 175. Even Lot's moral sense was no better than it should have been. It is the duty of a man to venture his life for the honor of his wife and his daughters, but Lot was ready to sacrifice the honor of his daughters, wherefore he was punished severely later on 176. The angels told Lot who they were, and what the mission that had brought them to Sodom, and they charged him to flee from the city with his wife and his 4 daughters, 2 of them married, and 2 betrothed. 177. Lot communicated their bidding to his sons-in-law, and they mocked at him and said, "O thou fool! Violins, cymbals, and flutes resound in the city, and thou sayest Sodom will be destroyed." Such scoffing but hastened the execution of the doom of Sodom. The angel Michael laid hold upon the hand of Lot, and his wife and his daughters, while with his little finger the angel Gabriel touched the rock whereon the sinful cities were built, and overturned them. At the same time, the rain that was streaming down upon the 2 cities was changed into brimstone. 179. When the angels had brought forth Lot and his family and set them without the city, he bade them run for their lives and not look behind, lest they behold the Shekinah, which had descended to work the destruction of the cities. The wife of Lot could not control herself. Her mother-love made her look behind to see if her married daughters were following. She beheld the Shekinah, and she became a pillar of salt. This pillar exists unto this day. The cattle lick it all day long, and in the evening it seems to have disappeared, but when morning comes it stands there as large as before. 180. The Saviour angel had urged Lot himself to take refuge with Abraham, but he refused and said, "As long as I dwelt apart from Abraham, God compared my deeds with the deeds of my fellow citizens, and among them I appeared as a righteous man. If I should return to Abraham, God will see that his good deeds outweigh mine by far." The angel then granted his plea that Zor be left undestroyed. This city had been founded a year later than the other 4. It was only 51 years old, and therefore the measure of its sins was not so full as the measure of the sins of the neighboring cities. 182. The destruction of the cities of the plain took place at dawn of the 16th day of Nisan, for the reason that there were moon and sun worshippers among the inhabitants. God said, "If I destroy them by day, the moon worshippers will say, were the moon here she would prove herself our Saviour, And if I destroy them by night, the sun worshippers will say, were the sun here, he would prove himself our saviour. I will therefore let their chastisement overtake them on the 16th day of Nisan at an hour at which the moon and the sun are both in the skies. 183. The sinful inhabitants of the cities of the plain not only lost their life in this world, but also their share in the future world. As for the cities themselves, however, they will be restored in the Messianic time. 184. The destruction of Sodom happened at the time at which Abraham was performing his morning devotions, and for his sake it was established as the proper hour for the morning prayer unto all times. When he turned his eyes towards Sodom and beheld the rising smoke, he prayed for the deliverance of Lot, and God granted his petition, the fourth time that Lot became deeply indebted to Abraham. Abraham had taken him with him to Palestine, he had made him rich in flocks, herds, and tents, he had rescued him from captivity, and by his prayer he saved him from the destruction of Sodom. The descendants of Lot, the Ammonites and the Moabites, instead of showing gratitude to the Israelites, the posterity of Abraham, committed 4 acts of hostility against them. They sought to compass the destruction of Israel by means of Balaam's curses, they waged open war against him at the time of Jephthah, and also at the time of Jehoshaphat, and finally they manifested their hatred against Israel at the destruction of the temple. Hence it is that God appointed 4 prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Zephaniah, to proclaim punishment unto the descendants of Lot, and 4 times their sin is recorded in Holy Writ 186. Though Lot owed his deliverance to the petition of Abraham, yet it was at the same time his reward for not having betrayed Abraham in Egypt, when he pretended to be the brother of Sarah. But a greater reward still awaits him. The Messiah will be a descendant of his, for the Moabitess Ruth is the great-grandmother of David, and the Ammonitess Naamah is the mother of Rehoboam, and the Messiah is of the line of these 2 kings. 188.